Staying with that topic, a number of high-flying Democrats have rallied behind Kamala Harris since Biden bowed out of the race on Sunday. Ms Harris will go head-to-head with Donald Trump, something she's not concerned about, as she addressed her supporters to show a glimpse of her qualifications to take him on.
I was the elected Attorney General, I've mentioned, of California, and before that I was a courtroom prosecutor. In those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type. And in this campaign, I will proudly put my record against his.
Well, that was Kamala Harris, but overnight her rival made a scathing attack on her at a Christian Conservative political conference. In the hour-long speech, Donald Trump mocked the pronunciation of the Vice President's name and called her a radical liberal.
She was a bum 3 weeks ago. She was a bum. A failed Vice President in a failed administration with millions of people crossing, and she was the border czar. Now they're trying to say she never was the border czar. She had nothing to do with the border. She was the border czar.
Well, John, Scardino is a representative from Democrats abroad. Also joining me is Peter Chowka. Peter is a veteran political analyst and frequent contributor to AmericanThinker.com. Good morning to both of you. John, I'm going to head to you first. The war of words seems to have truly begun. We're not unfamiliar with Mr. Trump launching scathing attacks on opponents, but I just want to get your reaction to these comments in particular. Were you surprised at all by them?
No, not at all. I mean, Donald Trump sees himself more as an entertainer than somebody who can lead a government. I think he proved that the last time he tried to lead the U.S. government. It was quite the failure. There were a lot of things that he could have gotten done very easily, like the infrastructure bill that Joe Biden ultimately passed and has created millions and millions of jobs. That project, that bill, had bipartisan support and was handed to him on a platter, and he, had a hissy fit and threw out the group that came to meet with him, and it never got passed, which is a shame, because I can think it would have done a lot for America when Donald Trump was president. But it took Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to come along and put that back together again, and put the country back together again, and recover from the crisis that he left it in after January 6th and COVID and other things.
And Peter, it was just 2 weeks ago today, actually, that Trump was shot at that rally in Pennsylvania. It's been a long 2 weeks, but many thoughts in the immediate aftermath of that Trump's tone had changed. He seemed to speak a lot and use the word unity about bringing the country together. Has something changed between now and then?
Trump's attitude changed slightly, but not enough, in my opinion. By the way, the Democrats certainly have held their own with attacking President Trump. For the last 3 years, they have said that he's an existential threat to the future of the country, and some Democrats have compared him to another Hitler. So I wish that both sides could get over the personal attacks and return to policy. But I have a bit of breaking news here. The Wall Street Journal 4 hours ago led with a story on a brand new poll in which they report that the presidential race now between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is essentially tied, according to their new poll. And 2 weeks ago, when it looked like it was going to be Trump versus President Biden, Trump was ahead by 6 points. So there is obviously an interest in Kamala Harris. Many people see her as like Obama 2.0, a person of color. And there's new interest in the possibility of the first woman president who is also black and half South Asian as well. But let me just, I have a memorandum here I'd like to quote two sentences from. This is from Trump's pollster addressed to the Trump campaign 4 days ago. And he says, obviously the situation we find ourselves in is totally uncharted territory and has no modern historical parallel. And he went on to say, expect a Harris honeymoon with the media and a bump in her poll numbers. But he concludes, but the fundamentals of the race stay the same. The Democrats deposing one nominee, President Biden, for another does not change voter discontent over the economy, inflation, crime, and the open border, etc. So it's going to be an interesting period ahead, and I assume that John will agree with me there.
And John, to come back to you, Peter mentions that strong words have been used on both sides, and there are so many things at stake in this election. Do you think the war of words that we mentioned, is that just indicative of how strong the feeling is, and actually how tight this race is?
Well, I certainly agree that the race has tightened, and there has been an overwhelming outpouring of support for Vice President Harris. I think you saw earlier this week the numbers that were reported about the fundraising that she's done has been historic, and the amount that she raised in a short period of time. But we're also seeing that in terms of her support and people coming out and registering to vote through Democrats Abroad, and people that have signed up to new members that we've gained in the last few days. So it has been a bit extraordinary. I would like to see us return to a little bit more civility. I think that it doesn't do our political institutions and our governmental institutions a lot of good to have the kind of language thrown around that has been used in this campaign and in previous campaigns. I think in the modern era, we've gotten to a point where it's just a real vicious attack on each other. And I would like to see us return to a bit more civility, talking more about the issues rather than trying to attack each other personally.
I'm interested as well to get your perspective on Kamala Harris's performance so far. She was thrown into the lion's den, if you will, just a matter of days ago. In your eyes, has her time and experience as Vice President set her up better this time around? Because she obviously unsuccessfully ran to be the Democratic candidate in 2020.
She did. She's got some experience, as you know, as senator. She ran and was elected as senator from California, where she served very well. And before that, she was in public service in the biggest state in the country. In California, she served as the Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer there. And then, as you say, she ran unsuccessfully for president in 2020. But for the last 3.5 years, she's been at Joe Biden's side and has been contributing to the programs and the initiatives that he's helped to pass. And I think Biden has had an extraordinary legislative record of passing not only the infrastructure bill that we talked about earlier, but also other bills to rebuild American manufacturing. He's also reduced healthcare costs for many Americans, particularly for senior Americans who have had to pay for prescription costs, and he's reduced that and the cost for insulin for diabetics and a number of other areas. So I think she's got a record that is impressive, and we'll know more about that. I think that her biggest liability at the moment is that we don't know more about her. The public doesn't know more about her, because the job of the vice president is to be a bit in the shadows and to be ready should something unfortunate happen to the president. But I think that her primary job as vice president is to be there in a supportive role and not in the lead. But I think now that she is in the lead, she is at the top of the ticket. What you'll see over the next couple of weeks is more information about her, and then obviously at the Democratic convention, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. Of course, she will be in the spotlight.
And Peter, we should say that she's the presumptive pick for the Democratic candidate. We're yet to see, as John mentions, her full campaigning playbook and what she intends to do. For Trump, what does Trump need to do to beat her, do you think?
Well, I hope the media at least holds her accountable for some things in her record, which would presumably benefit her opponent, President Trump, or maybe even Robert F. Kennedy, who's running as an independent candidate. She was appointed the border czar by President Biden in March of 2021. They had over 2 years, and the border is wide open. 10 to 12 million illegal immigrants have come in, the largest number in American history. In 2020, when she was a senator, she supported the Defund the Police movement, which is very unpopular. And of course, she also shares responsibility for historically high inflation under Bidenomics and the violent crime that's consuming a lot of American cities. Now, I think Trump certainly has his work cut out for him. And quite honestly, I don't know if he is capable of rebooting towards a more centrist campaign. Actually, he is, in my opinion, more centrist and more common sense in many issues than the uber left-wing Democrat Party now, as well represented by Vice President Harris. But he hasn't shown to this point the ability to reach out and try to expand his base. And of course, his vice presidential choice, Senator J.D. Vance, has been hung up now with a number of things that he said in interviews and on video years past, and the mainstream media, which is carrying the water for Vice President Harris now, is going after Vance with a vengeance. So if we could have a fair media and a good series of debates, we shall see. But the campaign is just really in its earliest stages right now, and the next 3 months will tell the story.
Okay, well, I think we could talk about this all day long, but that's all we've got time for on this topic. John Scardino, representative from Democrats Abroad, and Peter Chowka, veteran political analyst and frequent contributor to AmericanThinker.com.